Good evening and welcome to what is this, 14 of Mapping Kalegan. We have had quite a journey so far. Excuse me while I quickly switch off a screen to the side, which shows myself bobbing around in the background looking like an idiot. I don't need to be seeing that while I'm mapping. Alrighty, so if those of you who have not joined us before, I am going to be mapping Kalegan, one of the most important cities in the Reikland, which is a part of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay setting in Reikland. We are going to be, let me just pull up the map in front of us, like so, working our way through this city as we have done for the last, 13 episodes. And today we're going to be covering the barge building quarters down in the south of the city, alongside, whatever else we decide to do this part. I think we've got a bit of canal that's working from the side of the city walls through towards the part of the city that we've already built with all of its warehouses. I think it'd be good to get that section completed. As always, if you've got any ideas for anything that we could drop into those areas, pop them into the comments. I'll bring those comments up, like, for example, so I have no idea what it says, so let's find out. Fred Slipknot9 says, hi, Andy. Good evening. And good evening to you as well, Fred. Today, I started reading Soul Hunter by Aaron Depsky-Bowden. It's really cool. I missed you last week. Are you okay? Yes, I am. Last week, I was just working away like crazy and also had some personal stuff that I had to resolve. But I am most certainly back in the driving chair and intend to be for at least the next, I don't know, however many weeks it takes us to get on with finishing off our map. So as you may note, we will be bringing up comments as we go. We'll discuss them, talk them out. If they're ideas, if they're just comments about how we can do things differently, I'll ponder them, discuss them with you, and if you've got any further ideas, I'll bring those up on screen as well, and we'll just keep on working at this until we've finished off this section of the map. Today, I intend, as I say, to work through this barge building canal section of the city. For those of you who don't know, this whole part of the city, as has been mapped in the last 13 streams, is part of, it's on the edge of a slum, and on the other side, the edge of a more middle-class area. The south side of the city here having completely collapsed and sunk into water, which is all manner of fun in terms of drawing it, at least. We've already created a lot of really cool and fun locations for this section, including some crayfish farms over here, where we've got some sort of Cray Brothers thing going on. And we've got a whole, we've got ourselves a fighting pit over here. We've got ourselves an old temple that's sunk down here as well and has been repurposed by the locals for a different reason. Today, as I say, we're going to be working our way through this section here, which at the moment just says barge building. So if you've got any ideas for anything to drop into this location, now's the time to have a wee think and possibly drop that into the comments, and then we can start building it. In total, I'm going to be looking for at least, we're probably looking for at least 4 or 5 purple locations. Now, for those of you who haven't seen our previous streams, let's just very quickly work through the difference in our purples and our browns. Our purple locations are special feature places that will be on the key at the side of the map, and they're also going to be fully detailed over on World Anvil. World Anvil is a gigantic database of awesome that's there for storytellers, book writers, GMs to create entire worlds inside. And we're building not only Kalegan, but we're going to be building the entire empire that my version of the game, my version of the game, that's not a good way of putting it, that my campaign will be using as I present that campaign online when I stream through the enemy within. Right, so we've got ourselves not a huge amount to cover today. I'll quickly circle it out so that we can all see the area. We're probably looking at about that sort of area. Let's go for a brighter color so we can all see. We want to get this part here done. You may notice the 2 little red boxes up in the top of the map there. Those red boxes are actually part of a scale that I dropped onto a map on a previous stream. Each one of those boxes is about 10 yards, about 9 meters, for those of you who are looking for a scale to try and understand the space that we're using here. Right, so I'm going to jump into the comments, see what comments have already been dropped, and then I'm going to just start jumping into mapping this out. As I say, if you've got any ideas for this location, now's the time to start dropping them into the stream. So right at the very top, Martin Iron Rook drops in and goes, yay, made it. And I'm delighted to see you made it, Martin. Although I am horrified to find out that in your version of Warhammer, there is only a single College of Magic. Might I say, that makes my little heart go pitter-patter with sadness. Only a single College of Magic. But that's one of the reasons that we called our stream, the one that we're doing for the Enemy Within, Lawhammer rather than something related to Warhammer or something Warhammer adjacent or whatever. Primarily because this is Andy Law's version of Warhammer, just like your Martin Hammer is your version of Warhammer. And we all at home play very different games in what is ostensibly the same setting. So, yeah, that's why it's Warhammer for those of you who are interested. SD drops in and says, hi, everyone. Hi, SD. Great to see you. Just dropping in for a short visit before my Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay session this evening. Have fun mapping. We certainly shall. And you will be missed this week, SD. I hope your session goes really well. Fred drops in and goes, my world building idea is the triangular knob of land. Okay, so let's immediately start looking at that. That's that chunk of land right there. In between the barge building, which is loosely going to be here, and the bridge. We've got ourselves a bridge going over here. And can anyone remember what this individual location was here? As I recall, that is a Stevedores. I think it's Stevedores. I think that's the Stevedore Guild office. If anyone can double check that to make sure I'm not just speaking things up, making things up, pardon me, that'd be amazing. Should have its own offices of a Jackdaws Guild with its own pub and everything. Now, what do you mean by Jackdaws? Just to make sure I don't misunderstand you. If you can give a full description of that, that would be great. Oxecutor then drops in. Great to see you, Oxecutor. Is this the area where we're going to put a long rope making workshop? No, it's not. The long rope making workshop, to do a proper one, to get the proper hawsers and cables and similar gigantic ropes that are used in shipbuilding. Often these will extend for, well, at the very least, scores, if not possibly a couple of 100 meters or more. You need to have big, long spaces, and there's no way that we could fit that inside the city. We're almost certainly going to be putting that on the outside with a main hub of buildings and then a large stretch of land where the ropes themselves are stretched and coiled, probably using some form of engineering device at one far end. So no, that won't be here, but they will be the beneficiaries of some of those ropes and cables because they'll need to employ them when they're doing their barge building. Some barges, if you want an idea of a typical Reikland barge, I recommend doing a web search for a Thames barge. When we were doing the development for barges all the way back in 2nd edition, where in 1st edition, they pretty much just cobbled them together and dropped them down. And went, this is a barge. It looks approximately like this. It looks like some form of barge, what I have seen as the right turn, away we go. We had a big, long discussion about how we were going to organize the barges on the Reich. And I did. The culmination of that discussion was first dropped into the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Companion for 2nd edition, where you will find 2 primary types of barge, one of them being the Reichak and the other one being a standard Reich barge. And a standard Reich barge looks somewhat like a Thames barge from real life. There's a variety of barges that have got a similar makeup. But if you want to look up a Thames barge, it'll give you an idea for those flat-bottomed, wide cargo carrying barges which are sailed. These are not the sort of barges that get pulled along the side of a river, because you pretty much can't do that in most places of the Empire. The Empire is an extremely dangerous place with all manner of horrible gribblies and other species that are going to want to eat you, steal your stuff, otherwise disembowel you and suck down on your guts. So having a handy horse pulling along your barge is basically just one gigantic piece of bait waiting to happen. So if you do have yourself, for example, as we do here, barge paths which may have horse-pulled barges, they need to be properly guarded at all times, probably with a standing force of at least 5 to 10 guards just to hold off anything that might come along. But the vast majority of the actual barge transportation on the Reich River system is sailed barges. These are the sort of barges you'll see making their way down the mighty river flows, like the River Reich or the River Talabek or the Upper Reich or whatever. Similarly, the primary canals are wide enough to handle sailed barges making their way along, or at the very least to punt should it all go wrong. So cut a long story short, ropes not here. Martin then has Jane Valix, Marienburger barge builder. Well, cheap. His barges have an unfortunate habit of sinking. Not a good reputation to have. I do think we probably want to have at least 2 barge builders down in this section, possibly working in competition, almost certainly working in competition, with one of them, possibly both of them, having secured a commission to do this from the Duke Halskrug himself. And Lightman Halskrug will be quite interested in ensuring that both there are cheap options and also high quality options. So possibly one of them primarily goes with sailed barges, building standard Reich barges. The Reikaaks themselves, Reikaak, are mostly built down in Marienburg. So we could have somebody who's using a more advanced clinker built style barge, which is a bit more of a draft on it than your average barge. The reason for that being that a lot of the waters in the Reich are really wide, and they're wide enough that they actually get themselves almost their own. It's not so much their own tides, but it gets quite choppy in places. So having yourself a slightly deeper draft, so to speak, ensures that your boat doesn't topple over and capsize, something that I presume everyone would like to avoid. So the Reikaaks use a bit more of the Norse technology for their barge buildings, and they tend to go for because the way they're built, they can tend to be a little bit longer and a little bit wider in their belly. And there's a little description of some of the biggest Reikaaks in, I think, Fantasy Roleplay Companion, possibly. It's a wee while since I read that one, though. So, yeah, it is the Stevedores Guild. Thank you for confirming that, Martin. I think possibly we could have ourselves a Marienburg barge builder, though, just to move back on that, so that we can actually have someone building some Reikaaks here that could then be taken down the canals and sold off elsewhere, so that we don't have that feeling that Marienburg has a complete monopoly on the entire thing. Fred then adds, I think Jack's and Stevedore are the same thing, unfortunately. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure. Maybe the Merchants Guild instead. We all, Fred, you are already behind us. Our Merchants Guild is already down here. To give a loose idea, so you get an idea of where we've been, and this, I'll keep this relatively short. The city is built in 3 distinct phases. The very first distinct phase was here, which I hope you can see as I scribble it into place. That was the village that was here originally about 50 plus years ago. In fact, for several hundred years, there's been a village at this particular point of the river. Very, very good fishing here, for reasons that are potentially explained by the good old grandfather Wright Temple. Now, this is an old fishing village which is yet to be properly updated to match the rest of the city. Next, we have the first planned expansion of the city. I'm going to need a bigger brush so that you can actually see where that is, which went by its old walls. So that's approximately that area. Lightman's father, as I recall, put that together. And his goal was to expand this place significantly for a variety of relatively selfish reasons, based upon the fact that there was gold in Demdar Hills, or at least a lot of minerals. They discovered it and found that the easiest way to get it from up there to down here was through the natural valley, the Tal that's here already. And they carved that valley out and effectively turned it into one large canal system where the local drainage was interrupted, and that local drainage being interrupted has caused some rather damp, wet parts of the city. After that, though, and with the ownership, shall we say, or at least the leadership of the city passing over onto Lightman Halskrug, he made a mighty and aggressive expansion. That expansion significantly developed the city, and that's what's been going on for about the last 40 to 50 years. They have been pulling in people from all over the place to massively expand and support Lightman's dream of not only being one of the most important people of Reikland, which he already is. He's the High Lord Ambassador of the Reikland. There is nobody arguably more important than him when it comes to diplomatic affairs for the Reikland. Even the Emperor himself is just too busy to be dealing with all of these individuals who are coming from all over the world to try and get the most that they can from the richest realm in the Empire, which is the Reikland. Lightman Halskrug is extremely important. And in turn, because of that, what he is building here is a large diplomatic city built around him in many respects. Now, the original building of the city has got large harbors, trading points, and similar. A couple of temples of Sigmar, barge building, carpenters, various other industries up towards the north. The part to the city that we're moving down to at the moment were originally an old camp, which was here, that was used for all the architects and the builders for the mighty city expansion. And then later, as the city slowly but surely fell into place, it has collapsed into slumlands. What was originally what was planned to be a nice part of the city not only collapsed because it was quite literally collapsing underwater, as can be seen down in the bottom corner, but because a lot of the promises that were made to the builders and the architects were broken by the Hallscroogs, meaning that people who were once affluent suddenly became much less affluent and were not in a position to necessarily move because they had sunk a lot of their time and investment into the local area. So there's a lot of despondency in this particular part of town. Just off that, we have all the barge building. These are people who are responsible not just for building barges to get up and down from the mountains with all of the ore and the furs and whatever else that they've pulled from the wilder areas up in the Highlands. But they're also responsible for the trading barges, the more Thames-like barges, and perhaps the Reiklands that are sent out from Kalegan to trade with other towns and other cities. In particular, if we go upriver from this point, we'll be heading towards Karreburg, which is a capital, the capital of Middenland at the time when this map is put together. The time of this map is 2512, for those of you who know your Warhammer dates. And at that point, Karreburg is a capital. It is a capital of Middenland. It's not Middenheim, as many people expect it to be. Middenheim, up in the north, is the capital of, well, Middenheim, and all of Nordland is also ruled by it. It was taken by war, by conquest. So, loosely, we have got ourselves a trading centre. Most of the trade is dealt with in this area, and as we move upstream, we've got our stevedores, we've got large warehouses dealing with all the goods that are taken from downriver, and here we've got our barge building manufacturing area, and something that lies in that triangular bit of land in between that we're going to need to pin down in terms of what's it's used for. Perhaps it's also for barge building. A second company, I need to carve in some areas of water in there. I'm totally open with whatever other people think is a good idea. Next, how do barges go under the canal bridges? You just take the sail down. And our canal bridges that are here, we've already discussed in a previous stream. One of them is a swing bridge, and the other ones are either exceedingly tall, or alternatively, just swing out the road. We haven't actually drawn these two bridges yet and decided exactly how they should be handled, whether they are particularly high, which, given the width, doesn't make sense. The height of a Thames barge sail, in fact, I'm going to go grab a link for those of you who are interested in getting one. Thames barge, so that you can actually get an idea of what these things look like, because they've got a very distinctive look. In fact, there's one that's pretty much perfect. I remember back when I was doing the art orders for Death on the Reich and for Enemy in Shadows. Let me just grab that as a link and I'll pop that in as a comment. That is a classic Thames barge, and we were discussing with the internal artists and external for how to depict the barges for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and how they had to effectively be quite independent vessels. These are not vessels that relied upon getting pulled along land or anything similar. And I went out looking for lots of different sample images for them to say, okay, so it looks sort of like that. And the image I've just posted and images similar to this were the ones that I sent over to the artist J.G. O'Donoghue, who you may or may not know from his work on Warhammer. And he grabbed that and turned it into like the beer belly that you may have spotted already inside the Enemy Within campaign, and various other barges that were depicted through that period as well. But of course, we Warhammered them up. We slapped some spikes on it, possibly slapped a forecastle and an aft castle on it, possibly popped on some skulls, or maybe even the holy relics of a particular saint, almost certainly fake, hanging off like a mummy from one of the masts, because, well, that's awesome. And you also have your little crow's nest sitting at the top, which will have a little crow post attached to it so that we can kill the crows and slap them up there too. More to it than just it being a high point that the crows might gather on. The barge is a lot of fun, and I'm going to be, when I do Death on the Reich for my game, I'm going to build as much of an expansion as needed for all the potential add-ons that the barges could potentially take, because I've already built it for my previous game, so it's just going to be a matter of uplifting everything I've got and then retranslating it into a new set of rules. It'll be good fun. So loosely speaking, how do they go under the canal bridges? One of them is a swing bridge. Those two there have yet to be decided, and if you've got a good idea for a method of getting them beyond those bridges, do bring them up. This is obviously at the point that's past the beyond, pardon me, the bridge is there, and we've got our barge building there, which means our barges have to go down there if they're built. We could say, for example, that our sailed barges can only make their way up to the main warehouses here and can't go any further. We could say that, for example, these ones here will have to take their masts down as they're effectively launched past the bridges. There might be a local custom that's built up over the last 40 years for going underneath the bridges, which they might just slot under when everything's down. There might be an interesting and unique construction method, and also a method of ladening the vessels to ensure that they can go under one of these bridges. For example, if the barge has no cargo or any weight in it, it might rest too high to properly go underneath, along with all of the cabins or whatever else may be hanging up high. So you actually need to weight the vessel down to get it underneath properly. We could build lots of fun potential stories for that. And also then building crashes and things going wrong, potentially a few broken bits of barge that have gone down in the past because of some foolish mistake that was made. We can make some fun out of that, I think. Martin then adds on, a figurehead carver, one fine example at the edge of the workshop, has taken root and started to branch out looking like a dryad stepping from a trunk. Some locals have started to place small offerings at its base, bringing it to be a spirit. Rumors are starting to spread that it's a witch's curse. This is interesting. I say interesting because we've already got ourselves a tree man down in the south of the city. And for those who haven't caught our previous streams, I recommend the last stream, that's stream number 13, if you want to know a little bit more about that. In fact, while I'm here, why don't I quickly post a link for any of you who have not been involved with previous streams. I'll drop just the first one, because by going to the first stream and then working your way up from that one, you'll find all 13 that we've had so far. That link should work over in the comments. Let me also, while I'm here, because it's inevitable and I should say that we've got a patron. The patron isn't anything about us making our maps. I'm just mentioning it because it's always nice to say in passing for those of you who do want to support us. We're going to be streaming the entirety of the Enemy Within campaign soon, and we're building ourselves a gigantic studio, most of which is now done. We're very excited about that. We'll be building a nice little video taking you through everything we built, hopefully next week. I'm actually ordering a map for that. Me ordering a map. But I've taken the glorious Reikland map and I've made whatever amendments I need to that. And I'm going to be putting up a version of that in the streaming room because that'll be fun. So glorious Reikland's going up there, and I'm currently in the background working on a glorious Middenland as well. But I'm not calling it glorious because they're not glorious. Although they are redolent in glory, because they are, of course, Middenlanders. I'm going to go for a slightly different adjective for that one. It's going to be made by the same set of cartographers. If you look at the names on the glorious Reikland map from the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 rulebook, it's right in the double pages, you'll notice it's an A. Richter and an L. Koch, which is actually a reference to Lindsay and me. That's Lindsay, my wife, for those of you who don't know. A. Richter, Andreas Richter, is a cartographer in the Warhammer world that I've referenced more times than I care to mention. Andreas Richter being sort of an allusion to myself, Andrew Law. But it's also scouted out by an engineer, Holzenauer, and she is a character that I intend to use inside my streams as well, an engineer who is also a cartographer and a surveyor. And she works from Ubersreich. For those of you who know all of your Ubersreich lore, you'll probably know the Holzenauers if you know it really well. It's a bit of an obscure line, the Holzenauers. But yeah, that's super fun. Anyway, that's by the by. We have ourselves a Patreon where we're going to be streaming the entirety of the Enemy Within. If you want to know more about that, feel free to go and take a check out over at the link. I'm really looking forward to doing that. I've just done almost done. If Erin happens to be out there watching this and she's saying, have you done this for me yet? I've not done it yet, Erin. I've almost finished a new set of 6 portraits full of our PCs. It's taking me far longer than I expected because 2 of them just refuse to look the way I want to. But that's by the by. As a last link, I'll drop down on Discord. Now, this is quite an important link, actually, because if you're following our streams, we do quite a lot of stuff over in Discord. And if you want to post a link to something, if you link it up in Discord, that's the best place to put it. I'll put a quick comment over in Discord, which says, here! That's the thread to drop anything that you might want to share with the rest of the group, either now, if you've got an idea that you want people to actually look at and say, I think it should be built or it should look like this. Or alternatively, you're coming to this stream maybe a month, 2 months, or even a year later, do drop into our Discord, because even then, all your ideas could be collated and possibly added onto the existing Kalegan that we already have. So yeah, that's our Discord channel where we do all of our stuff. But beyond that, let's carry on. I believe I was sitting about here discussing the spirit. We've already got ourselves a treeman spirit, and we've already got the possibility of an angry spirit that's on the outside, because this entire part of Kalegen used to be forested until very recently, and its mighty expansion has overridden what was a relatively spiritual area, probably. So having something slowly turning into what looks like it could be some form of dryad, could possibly be like through pareidolia or something else, mistaken as a local god or something else, that could work quite well, particularly if we do have our angry spirit that possibly wants to get hold of maybe a trapped dryad that's captured here, and she wants to get her mate or something similar. You could build an interesting story out of that one. So I think this is quite a good idea. I also quite like the idea of having ourselves a nice clear figurehead carver section and a way of discussing that as a location, so making that a purple place. I particularly like the idea as well that possibly our figurehead carver purposely took a dryad without really being aware that it's a dryad or a spirit or anything else, but purposely took a tree that was already in the shape of something and then chopped the fucker down, pulled it over, and then just effectively stripped away the rest to create what would be the figurehead that he was attempting to make. That figurehead, sadly, was alive and had to be abandoned at the side or whatever. There's definitely a story in there. It can be pulled down. Martin then adds, sorry, maybe the barge builder name was a bit off. I was trying to think of how to make James Wallace sound Marienburgish. Jim Vallis was as close as I could get. James has already got more than enough of a reference in our Warhammer. He doesn't need another one. Indeed, one of the episodes that we're going to have for our Enemy Within campaign is named after him. I speak to James quite frequently because he streams with us on the Rookery. For those of you who don't follow the Rookery, you should. We stream weekly about gaming. Go check out Rookery Publications on YouTube. Actually, you should be able to find it on YouTube with ease if you want to go find that. We stream about gaming, writing, books, world building, absolutely everything else. And James is one of our regular guests who's always on chatting away about stuff. And for those of you who don't know, he wrote a rather famous article about sinking fucking barges during the Enemy Within. That was our link for our barge. Then Martin adds, copper lining, a workshop that rolls out thin copper panels to line barge hulls to prevent spoilage, leaks, damage from pests. They have easy access to copper ore from the hills and a reasonable relationship with the foundry to process it into ready-to-roll bars. That's not a bad idea. That could, whether it's a separate section to the barge builder or whether it's a part of the existing barge building location, possibly one of the barge builders has got a contract with the forges allowing them access to it and the other one doesn't, causing again a point of tension. One may want to sabotage the other or get PCs involved for one reason or another. In the end, we need to try and ensure that we're constantly thinking about how we can build hooks for all these locations. Right, so I think that's us done the comments, other than my comment suggesting that if you want to check out part 1 of Kalegan, do pop over there. If you want to check out our Patreon, go there. And if you want to check out our Discord, go over there. So I'm going to start taking a little look at this. We've got ourselves definitely one location where we're barge building, a location in the triangle that we've yet to really decide what to do with, although we did have suggestions for stevedores. We've got ourselves an equivalent of a stevedores mission up here where they can already drink, gather, make merry, organize, and otherwise hold their guild meetings. So I'm not sure we necessarily need more stevedore stuff here, but we definitely could do that if anyone's got a good idea for it. But yeah, I don't think we've got anything else here. I do notice though that purple building there has got no highlights on, which makes me feel a little bit sick. So let me just, before I start doing anything, quickly add a sharp little bit of white highlights to this section here to make sure that it's been done, and also add a little shade on that side because for reasons unknown to man or beast, I forgot to shade out one part of it. There we go. We're off. Right, so I'm going to go for the obvious part first, which is the barge building area, because we know exactly what we're going to do there. I'll start by doing some edging. Once I've done the edging and defined the area, I'll check the comments just in case anything new has popped up as ideas. And then that done, we don't actually have a lot of space here for barges to get through. I don't like the amount that we've got. So let's have a little look. Maybe widen it like so there on that side. Turn that to water. And then straighten out along that line instead, giving us some form of crossing here, and maybe an arched bridge, possibly made of wood, going across. This is a footbridge almost certainly, not something that can take stock of any weight, definitely not something that's going to be filled with minerals. Now I've done that, I can quickly mark in the water, so I'm going to grab myself a watery color and just quickly fill that in there. A little bit paler on that one, please. There we go. Okay, so we've got ourselves definitely some sort of shape going over there. Let's define those edges as well. So clearly we've got barges slipping in. Now we need to look at the scale. View my thing, because our average barge can be anything from 20 to 30 yards for the larger ones. So let's bring up our scale and see how long that is. 20 to 30 yards is approximately, that's 20, that's 30. Okay, so that's actually quite sizable. If we imagine ourselves a relatively large barge, that'll square off that way. That's going to fill up most of the canal space that we've got here for the very, very largest, where the average ones sitting around that are going to be sitting much smaller. Again, though, taking up most of the space. So we're going to have to be pretty careful about our widths for these canals. Just see that in practice there. Got to make sure that the hull doesn't break under the strain. There we go. Okay, so that means that this section here is where our larger barges are being made. This section here is where our smaller barges are being made. These are the barges that are probably going upriver, not upriver, pardon me, up the canal system. Most of these are the barges that are utilized by House Hallskrug and whichever trading guilds that they work with. So they're going to have to be in this section and possibly this section. Our larger barge builder dealing with our big, pardon me, I'm on Zoom for reasons I didn't expect. Let's get off the Zoom. That's going to have to probably be here. So we could possibly mark off that section there for barge builder number 1. They'll have a couple of slips are making their way in. We'll have ourselves offices, areas where the ships are being built. Well, they're not ships, they're barges. So we'll need at least a yard at least that long there. This one is much smaller, a couple of barges, spaces in there, offices on that side. They get dropped into the water here, possibly here too. Okay, I think that most of this is going to be entirely dedicated to barge building. If anyone's got anything else that should go in here, now's the time to say. I think, though, that we're looking at two businesses. One business that's run by Marienburgers, and they're creating larger, longer barges, slightly higher technology, using clinker-built system for some of them. They're going to be sprit sailed. Going to have big triangular sails on the square sails that you'll often get in other ones as well. Then we've got our smaller barges, some of which are going to be sailed. Some of these are going to be towed down barge paths and punted. A little bit like lighters, if you know what lighters are in terms of how they're used. So something like that. Now, before I start pulling in, see if I've got any comments. Got one comment to look at. Hi, Martin. He brings up tar barrels, a workshop full of stinking, bubbling black pitch to waterproof hulls. Yeah, we're going to need that. A local gang frequently attends to dip offenders as punishment, particularly after hours. I think that could definitely be an interesting thing. We're right by what is effectively ganglands down here anyway. So having some people come up and give someone a tar dipping sounds very much like some of the horrific local traditions that we had up our way for weddings, where people were quite literally tarred and feathered. Well, men were tarred and feathered and driven through town, black head to toe, completely covered in feathers. It was a particularly popular thing to do amongst the farmers and the fishermen and the older communities up where I came from at the very north of Scotland. And you would find that most summer months there would be at least one or two lorries driving by with naked fellows who had been tarred and feathered with jeering mates all around them because, yay, they got married, and that was a great thing. Might I say that I did not get married up there. I eloped with my wife and got married down in the south here by Edinburgh, where things are much more civilized, much less likely to have you tarred and feathered just for deciding that you'd fallen in love with someone. So that all said, I quite like that idea. So let's make sure that we include something that works for that in this area. I think I just need to start building up this location with a constant eye for slipways, things moving into the water, for the barges being constructed onshore and possibly down in the water as well. We could possibly have one section of it dry docked out so the water can be pumped out, or something similar. Martin also adds yup, I've seen a few of the tar and featherings. Martin is also from further up in Scotland. It's a fine place further up in Scotland. After a drive to be tied up in the market cross or a local lamppost. Yeah, totally. It was not the most, let's just say it wasn't the happiest thing that we could ever see. It was, yeah, that's certainly not something that brought a smile to my face, but we did all laugh when we were kids. Alrighty, so I'm going to dive in and get this particular section sorted out. I think that there's almost certainly a local tradition of tarring and feathering as well amongst the barge builders that we'll want to consider, because why wouldn't we? We've got ourselves a main road that's making its way along here, so let's just mark that out so we don't forget where it's going. We've got an area where our barges are going to be built. To make that nice and clear, I'm going to just mark that in using my roads layer. All of this map is built using a tutorial that I made for the Rookery. Indeed, I am doing a bunch of tutorials for the Rookery just now, one every single week about mapping. This week I did mountains. And did 7 different types of mountains that you can use on your maps. And these are mountains that you can do with pen and ink, as well as doing it digitally, as I'm doing here. Next week, I'm going to be doing forests. I recommend, if you're into your mapping, go giving those a look out. I'm going to be doing the week after that another masterclass, the week after that yet another one. But this map in particular was made using a masterclass that I did for how to do city maps. And everything I'm doing in this is only using the tools that I built for that. It was, I think, a 7-stage how to build cities masterclass. And it showed you the basics of how to do the buildings and everything else besides. So if you're interested in how I am doing this, that's the place to go. I suppose I should get a link. I have not got a link for that yet. So I'm going to quickly grab that while I'm chatting. That's inside the Rookery. Inside the Rookery is our, as I mentioned already, weekly streaming show. But it is also, he said, grabbing the link where we do our masterclasses. And that is a link for that. Should you like to go pop by that? Let me just bring it up like so. Inside the Rookery, good times. So yeah, if you're interested in your mapping, that's a really good place to go. By the time that the end, in 3 weeks' time, I think I will have 6, 7, 8, at least 9 mapping masterclasses up there, explaining different aspects of mapping, ranging from mountains to hills to rivers to cities to much more besides. And I'll also have up there things like how to create data slates or your own, yeah, I can get an idea of how this is going to work. Data slates or futuristic pads, retro future pads more than anything else. Right, okay, so I think that's the area that I'm going to work around. Let's now add our lines into this section so we get an idea of what this place actually looks like. I'm not going to be drawing in anything that's half built or is potentially in the process of being built to characterize the area, largely because the second I start doing that, I kind of get this urge to do it everywhere where there's detritus or things lying around. And I tend to do a bit, but not much of that, because you can effectively go down a rabbit hole and make your map super, super complicated and difficult to read. And I have no desire for this map to be difficult to read. It needs to be referenced by players through use, which means that all of our roads need to be nice and wide, even if the roads themselves are not necessarily wide. All of our streets need to be nice and clear so that anybody can see where they are. All of our primary buildings need to have clear, defined shapes so that people can understand what they look like. Let's fence off this section like so. This is where they're clearly doing some building. I'm going to drop in a slipway that's clearly going under the water here, which will have a shadow that goes something like that into that section there. So that'll be a slipway going down. Let me just, oops, brush please. With a couple of, so they're making some of the barges. Other barges are being made over here in a far larger section, some of which goes into rough land at the back here, bound by a stone wall. It goes about there. Let's have that stone wall go all the way around at the back of their buildings. Main buildings don't need to be that large. We need to have areas to hold and store everything that they don't want stolen. But if we fence off the entire area, we can leave a watchman or 4 dealing with the... Yeah, do I really want that? We want big gates at the front. That'll go down into a longer slipway. It goes down into there. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's straighten out that entire area. Push it outwards there. Let's also add some extra water into the area I just marked off here. Oh, I'm on the right layer. I appear to be. Why aren't I drawing? I've got a road there. What an idiot. Let's get rid of that bit of road. I couldn't understand why I couldn't see what I was drawing. It's because the road was covering it. There we go. That's better. And that's a slightly different color while I'm up there. Let me just sort that out. There we go. That'll do. Right, let's get back to our lines here. Effectively, this looks like it's going to be all one giant set of purple locations, as in locations. I think I might... Do I want to separate them? Yes, I think I do. And we can have them bridging their way across using planks or anything else that allows them to get over. So I can do that. That means we have ourselves an actual divide between the 2 barge building companies that's physical, not just... and the wrong brush. Let me just quickly grab the right brush there. There we go. Keep on accidentally touch. Oh, I changed the brush again. There we go. Okay. Okay, yeah, I can see how this place works. I think that's actually this location largely done. We don't need that much more there. The barge can drop there if it wants to, dropping off stock. Things can be piled up. If we make this a private jetty that they have access to there, that pretty much sorts out the entirety of everything we need for that area. Over here, we can have a host of smaller buildings and warehouses that overlook the water there. Individual GMs can decide exactly what is here. There could be anything from storage locations to offices to merchants to anything else. Let's now start working through the different types of building that we have here. Okay. Far larger offices in this one. Waste ground where they're building directly into, grooves into place. Let's get rid of the road in that section. Possibly it goes right down here as well. Crude slipway there. Okay. Let's wall off that section. We've got ourselves a long. Do we actually need, given that this entire area can be walled off, we don't actually need to wall off the internal section because there's no way to it except for by water. So we can pull that off and just wall it directly. Then have at the back a variety of secondary houses that others can decide exactly what they are, some of which are right by the water. And we'll need a passageway through there so we can have ourselves some townhouses or equivalent over here. Backing out and looking onto the slipway. Some of these are possibly shops. Possibly something else. Imagine our bubbling tar around here somewhere too. Okay, so we're going to need some smaller warehouses sitting at the back. Do we need anything else here? Yeah, let's drop a couple over here as well. It's funny doing sections like this because I grew up on a harbour and I can almost imagine what a lot of these areas look like because I've seen so many of them in my time, both in terms of the shipbuilding and the trade and the way things just get stored in large flat areas and how wasteland actually sometimes can become core land for how the port works because things just get deposited there and held. More modern times, all those areas get paved over, but in the end, it's just a large paved area where everything gets stored, which would originally have just been a large muddy area where everything was stored. Okay, I'm actually all right with this, even though it's kind of sparse in terms of actual locations. I think that this is already beginning to form into something that makes sense. We've got ourselves a couple of bridges that we're going to have to justify as to how they work. So I would suggest if anyone's got any ideas for how that works, now is the time to drop them into place. I'm not entirely sure how they work in terms of how our barges got underneath them and similar. Let's take a look at whatever comments we might have. I don't think we have very many, but I'll ping them up now. And if there's not much, I'll just go straight into colouring in this section and move on to the next one. So first up, Karen Brule, a one-time explorer, is based in a low-rent warehouse where they breed and attempt to train small primates. Acquisition from distant jungles. If only they could train the monkeys to juggle flaming torches, they'd make a fortune. We're quite far away from where most of these explorers would be. We're not in a primary port here. We're sort of upriver from a primary port. And primates are going to be pretty far away from here. So I think we need a slightly fuller story to justify that character. Not that that character wouldn't fit, just I think we probably need a slightly fuller story. Alrighty. That being the case, I'm just going to go and start filling this in, given that we don't have much in the way of comments there. Love it. It's going to make it super easy to do this section. So, hello. Thank you. Let's get our location color, which is purple, and start coloring in. We have ourselves one primary shipbuilder here, which goes in purple. The entire offices will be in purple. So all parts of this building are going to get done. That's one. Our second primary shipbuilder is a more sprawling operation and is over here. And we could also including that building there. Indeed, this entire area really is theirs. So maybe we should pen it in like so that it's quite clear where the delineation of this particular one goes. And if that's the case, I'll probably want to mark in these sections too, just to make sure it's quite clear. There. Okay, that's pretty good. Not much to do there. Next, we go on to our building color. All buildings are done in brown. That's our secondary color. These buildings, as I almost mentioned earlier in the stream, but didn't quite get to, are up to the GM or individual users to decide exactly what they're used for. When we do the write-up for Kalegan, which we're popping up onto the World Anvil, the write-up will describe each district in general and provide more than enough detail for the sort of buildings you would expect to find there. And in this case, I've missed one of the purple buildings on the inside there. Let me just grab that there. So in this case, it would probably discuss warehouses and shops and various port stroke harbor base stuff. Yeah, not too much to draw here. Okay, so as I'm finishing off this section, if anyone has any idea for what we could drop into our triangle of land that we're about to move on to, now is very much the time to bring that one up because we're just about to move over towards it. So whatever is in this section, it'd be good. Given there's not actually that much here, I'm just going to go straight on to the highlights and the shades straight away, just so that we've got them out of the road. These are, as discussed in the stream where I did the tutorial, super easy to do. There's not a great deal of thought in these. The goal for them is not to spend ages creating carefully constructed shadows. It's to create a loose idea, there we go, of where all the light and the shade hits on an individual building. Now it's going to be a lot deeper because we're down into the canal itself. Love it. Yeah, I'm kind of digging the way this place has already fallen into place. It feels like it's got the right amount of area to build everything that needs to be built according to the description we've given it. And that rocks. Right, okay. That's our shadows in place for this section. Let's quickly do our highlights. We're not going to do very much for these either. Exactly the same process as described in this tutorial that you'll find over on the Rookery. I missed a couple of the shades over there, so let's just grab those now. There we go. Let's go back to our highlights, which are very nearly almost done. Not a great deal to highlight on these. Love it. Also missed the shade on that one, so I'll quickly fill one in. I do love it when we do an easier area that doesn't take a great deal of work to get into place. We have almost done that one already. Oops, I'm on the wrong color. There we go, and shade that in back there because I missed it. Okay, I'm pretty cool with that. No, I'm not because I've missed a little bit of shade down at the bottom. Let me just grab that. And then a little bit of building color just to ground that in. Yeah. Yeah, like that. That definitely looks like we've built ourselves an area where we can do our barge building. We've got ourselves 2 purple locations, both of which are barge builders, and we're done. We're now moving up to the second section. We've already had an idea up there from, I believe it was Martin, about putting a figurehead carver, so somebody whose business is carving, and some sort of dryad-based nonsense rising from that as well, which I quite like. So we're going to drop that there. We could do with at least one other purple location. So if anyone's got an idea for that, do drop it down. Right, before I start drawing this section, I'm going to quickly see if there's any things. Executor asks, is it worth drawing a work-in-progress barge? As I sort of alluded to, although I didn't go into a great deal of depth, I prefer not to fill the map with all the bits and bobs when it's a player-facing one, because it starts making everything super messy and difficult to read one part from another. So I tend to not bother. If it's not permanently affixed into a particular location, I tend to just not draw it and assume that everything else can be assumed by whoever does the reading. So, for example, if you are a GM that's using this town, you might decide that that particular warehouse where they're building ships is shut down, and there are literally no barges there. Where if I put one on the map, everyone will have an expectation that there should be a barge, at least one barge there, and that it's probably a permanent fixture. So yeah, I tend to avoid popping them on. Right. So any other comments? Check one more. There was a ticket to Lustria location, says Martin. There was in the main docks. Perhaps Brule could in fact be one of the sales team, but has become distracted by the side project with which they hide from colleagues. So we're talking a side project being his training monkeys. I don't know why I find training monkeys but funny, but apparently I do. Kinda. I think I'd want more of a story. What's the point of this? What are we doing with it? If we're going to have ourselves someone who's training monkeys or training indeed anything, perhaps an animal trainer in general instead, we need to have a story. Why? What's going on? What makes this exciting and interesting? We're making this as an actual feature location and not just something that we as individuals just happen to like because it's cool. What can we do that will make the GM go, yeah, that fucking rocks. I need to include that in my game. I want to use that adventure hook. This is really cool. The PCs will be excited by this. Just someone randomly chaining monkeys by itself, I'm not quite sure has enough of a tail. I still think we need a bit more to it for that one to go. I'm going to start defining the edges while you're all having a mull. We're looking loosely for what are we going to put into this part. There we go. This triangle here of Kalegan. At the moment, we definitely have ourselves a figurehead creator, which I really like. I think there's a lot of go with that story. But we don't have much more. We could do with at least one more feature location, something that sort of defines the area. Just across here, we have ourselves the stevedores. So we obviously don't require any more of that. We also have ourselves down here metal workers. I'm doing a bunch of metal workery things. As I recall, no, the metal workers, are they further up? No, the metal workers are up here. I've got the wrong one. Can anyone remember which location that one is? I'm looking at it. Quite a few. Too many locations for their own good. If anyone can remember what the locations, let me just bring out my pen are. This one and this one are. That'd be super useful to know. Anyway, I'm going to build in a couple of roads to make this section make a bit more sense. And then once I've done that, I'm going to check the comments. If we've got any good ones, I'll go through them and we will build ourselves something from it. If we don't, I'll just start randomly assigning things to this area. Right, so I'm going to make the edges on the barge path makes sense. Whoops. I accidentally hit my button there again. I'm also going to put the water in on the lower level for the areas that I've slightly redefined. So go and grab myself a nice watery color and just quickly fill up that area.
And I've got a little bit down here too. All right. So we've got a shape of an area building now. Let's get our roads and connect these a little bitty. So we've got ourselves some distinct sectors that we can fill in. Let's make make 5 relatively clear sectors. We can maybe build that up as shopping or some other waterfront, barge-based business stuff. Yeah. Oh, okay, let's start looking at that before I start filling in and checking if there's anything. We have ourselves a couple of comments. First, we have maybe a trained monkey was the only animal person inside Noble's room when said Noble was killed at a party they were hosting. So now we're talking on the... Hi, Richard. Delighted to see you here. So now we're talking on the adventure hook side that maybe the trained monkeys are being... Now we're talking. Now, the reason I say now we're talking is because one of the core things that we're doing with all the locations that we build is that we're trying to remember in the back of our heads the core theme, the core motifs of this particular part of the Reikland, and that is politics. That is the fact that this city is new. So the new overrunning the old, which is why things like the Dryad works really well, because you get that idea that the modern desire to expand has taken over the old, but the old is going to struggle free and hopefully do something from that. On top of that, you've got, as you allude to here, our idea that the politics can be deadly. So now we've got our animal trainer who's possibly training animals to do things that are, well, dodgy as fuck. Poisoning people, dropping things into certain things. Monkeys are particularly intelligent. They can be trained to do a variety of things. And that would include potentially assassination. Perhaps our monkey trainer or other animal trainer is also a would-be assassin who is employed to do particularly dark jobs on Moore's Liebe's full nights. There's all manner of ways we could tie that in as potentially something for making that individual, our trainer of animals, a little bit more interesting as to what they're doing and why it matches the core theme of this particular place. Martin adds then, stonemason. A stonemason is for what? I feel like you were answering a question I asked earlier and I've forgotten. That will be those locations down here. This is a stonemason. Thanks, Martin. Got there in the end. Stonemason, so that means the one besides probably the sculptor, isn't it? Because we had ourselves a sculptor sitting beside. In fact, that works quite nicely for marrying the barge builders, our figurehead carver who can take things down to our ships. Yeah, I quite like this. Our figurehead carver definitely fits in really well here. We still have one more location. I think we might end up having our animal trainer in here somewhere. Quite like the idea of where this is building now. Richard then adds, everybody could have seen the noble leave the main room to his office or something. It's a bit of a mystery hook. I do like a mystery hook. Can't go wrong with a mystery hook, Richard. So I think, yeah, we have some, I think definitely we have some space here now. So we've got ourselves someone who is used to training exotic animals, may also be training animals that have been gathered locally. So you might find that he's attempting to train things like snotlings, or maybe he also is somewhat of an expert at things like demogryphs. Perhaps when there's going to be a menagerie in the north of the city. So this could be a good link between those two locations, our animal trainer and then the menagerie. One of our jobs as a developer of this particular location is to ensure that the adventure hooks that we create aren't just individual stories that are interesting. That's fun. Anybody can do that, and any writer can do that. What you're looking for to do here is to build a vast network of story hooks to all link together that effectively create almost a mini campaign just by using the material here. So if you go and speak to the animal trainer adventure hook takes you up to the menagerie. The menagerie adventure hook takes you down to some nobles. The noble adventure hook then takes you over to a graveyard. So our adventure hooks are constantly linking into other parts of the city. And that works really well for an investigation, which takes you around the city, which I like. An animal trainer might not immediately make you think that, but if our dodgy animal trainer is actually responsible for some important assassinations of late, we've got ourselves a bit of a story building there, quite like that. So awesome. Stonemason is a statue sculptor. Thanks for confirming that, Martin. Delighted that you did. Thanks. Richard then adds, glad to be here for the first time. Delighted that you're here for the first time, Richard. Participation in these streams is what makes them work. If I just randomly added my own ideas all the time, it would be a bit well, dull and it would just be all my stuff. All the creativity that we've had from all of the people that have watched the streams for the last 13 episodes is what really makes it all work. And, you know, sometimes we've had 10, 15, 20 commenting. Sometimes we've only had 1 or 2. And both of those, this is our first stream in a couple of weeks, so I'm never expecting many to turn up today, to tell the truth. So I'm delighted you've made it in. You're the best. Thanks so much. Anyway, I think we've got ourselves, for this section, ourselves an animal trainer. Do we want to add anything to this in terms of the building and what it looks like? Does it have any land around it? And we've got ourselves a figurehead sculptor. So we've got ourselves a carver of wood working here as well. So probably a workshop, the housing that they have, and the space that they'll need for storing all of their wood. Is there anything else that we think we need for that? If you have any ideas for that, drop it into the comments. Martin then was adding, I was thinking monkeys are so hard to train because they are tired from their nighttime exploits of sneaking out the warehouse and getting up to nefarious purposes. Sneaking out, so are we talking these monkeys are independent-minded? Are we talking that someone is using some Gur-based magic to try and exploit these animals for their own ends? That could be an interesting second adventure hook, for example. Perhaps the local trainer is getting really rather upset that his somewhat, let's say, fractious animals are not doing what they normally would do. Unbeknownst to him, somebody else is making use of them. Perhaps the Skaven that we mentioned previously has got some access to some Gur-style magic, and he's using that on the animals as well. We've got lots of potentials that we could wrap that in with a hook for. So we've both got ourselves our animal trainer that's up to dodgy business, who's actually getting upset because someone else is using his animals for their own reasons too. And another primary question would be, is it just an animal trainer that deals with just, say, primates, monkeys, and the like? Or do we have someone who's used to dealing with all manner of different types of animals, but has individual specialities as a side business? Like, for example, he might have 3 monkeys that he has trained for the last 4 or 5, maybe longer years. Maybe he's sighted down in Marienburg before. Maybe he was down in, say, I don't know, maybe down in Tilia before that. And these animals that he has bought and trained have been used in assassinations in many key places. And he has been brought up here perhaps by a Tilian merchant, or maybe one of the princes from Tilia has sent them up here to deal with primarily assassination. Assassination is the name of the game in many parts of Tilia. And we could possibly even have him with strong Cainite leanings, given that Cain, the god of murder, is most certainly not a prescribed god down in the south, although here in the Empire, pardon me, he absolutely is a prescribed god. So we can also get a little bit of potential tension between his natural religious proclivities and the fact that he doesn't see it as anything bad, and the local opinion on what Cainite worship is, which is, as far as they're concerned, the most evil of the evil. Quite like that. Oh, sure, then adds, how about a Shalian run soft drink brewery? Trying to get the locals to drink less alcohol so there's less drunken violence. Sadly for the Shalians, it's a proper mixer with spirits. Right, so on Shalians, we already have 2 locations marked for Shalians, so I would be loath to add a third here that was directly tied to Shalians. It might be better someone who was perhaps leaning towards Shalia, or someone who had a lay member of the cult, for example, rather than an actual part of the clergy. We've got ourselves a location up here, which I'm just marking on the map now. Here, half of this is taken over by Shalians, and further down here, we have a large mercy house for the Shalians, which they're attempting to reclaim, that was lost when parts of the city sunk. So I think having something here as well, which is Shalian based, is not necessarily the best idea, but the idea itself is pretty cool. Can you think of a way to make that work without necessarily it being Shalians? So something to add on that. In fact, pop that. Comments already arrived. Oxcutor then adds, maybe a minor noble running a temperance league is running it. Now we're talking. So possibly, let's see, temperate gods in the Empire. Not that many. Sigmar is often of the opinion that one should be temperate, because excess is one of the primary sins for Sigmar. We all know the primary 4 sins of excess, rage. I won't go into it. We know our chaos gods. So having a Sigmarite noble, a Sigmarite leaning one might work quite well, particularly given that the Sigmarites locally are not getting on very well with the Holzkrugs, because the Holzkrug very much positions himself as a primary rival to the Emperor. And the Emperor, as far as many in the Cult of Sigmar is concerned, is a living embodiment of Sigmar. He is Sigmar's heir. He is Sigmar's, let's say, representative for ruling the Empire. There is a separation of cult and state in the Empire, and each of the different Grand Provinces have got a bigger or lesser distance between them. And in the Reikland, there's a fairly clean distance between the Prince of Reikland and the Grand Theogenist. That doesn't mean, though, that there isn't a certain amount of crossover there. So I think that that could work quite well. And if we're going for a minor noble, why is it down here? What is this something that the minor noble has sponsored, living up on the hill that's further away, and has sponsored this down here? So we're dealing with a host of temperate league type people that are responsible for what's going here, attempting to make some sort of effervescent brew, for example. We could have possibly some form of chemical addition to this, so some sort of engineering, chemistry-based type adaptation. Perhaps there's some form of vats that are being used. Perhaps that's being manipulated by another party who's looking for poisons. There's lots of different ways that we could use this. Can you think of anything that works quite well for all of that? Hirin has dropped in. Hello, Hirin. I can't decide whether it's Hirin or Hirin or Hirain, although the Hiryn does sort of suggest Hirin. I hope it's Hirin. It sounds very good in my Scottish accent. Hirin. So, evening to you, Hirin. Delighted to see you there. We're making our way through, at the moment, an area beside the barge building and the stonemason section of town. At the moment, we are landing upon probably having some sort of wooden carver type individual here. Possibly someone making some sort of effervescent brew. And what was our third location? I've already forgotten it. Oxecutor then adds, maybe it uses canal water, filters it to make the drink. Now we're reaching. There was a story, a relatively large one, about filtered water down in London, where they're basically just taking London's water, filtering it, and selling it as mineral water, which it most certainly wasn't. Coca-Cola were doing that. And similarly, they were bottling that for their Coke Zero. And that went down pretty poorly. So we could possibly make some sort of reference to that with what we put in there. That could work quite well. Quite like that. Hirin, thank you very much for confirming. So it's Hirin. Hirin. There's almost a double R there. Hirin. Delighted that you made it, Hirin. Moving down finally to exotic animal trainer. That was the last one. So yeah, exotic animal trainer. Carver of wood and maker of interesting things to slap on the front of our barges and our boats and our ships. And finally, possibly some sort of brewer. If we're doing that, our brewer will probably go there. Our animal trainer probably here. Our carver probably here. So I'm going to start my first block, where I'm going to be creating the space needed for the person who's doing the carving, and probably put a host of, oops, wrong color, forward-facing buildings in front of that. This will be our workshop here, which goes into an area there with our main building where he's living, our workshop building at the side, an area where there's lots of wood being stored. Our potential dryad is in there as well. I'm sorry, Hirin, for not explaining that. It was explained earlier in the stream. We have got ourselves probably a couple of shops, or maybe even he's got a shop in there as well where he's serving small carvings that he's made. Maybe scrimshaws as well, if he likes that. Maybe he doesn't just deal in wood, he also deals in bone. Perhaps he's got a history on naval vessels. We've got ourselves probably warehouses sitting at the back directly onto the canal. A little bit of space and wasteland around that one. Yeah, I think some warehouses here. Possibly one of them's got an office in the top. as we move into the back. Our main thoroughfare up towards our stevedores up here, which do I want to leave that? No, I'm going to take that one out. I'm going to take that one out as well. Have that one as a dead end. So I'm thinking probably townhouses, slightly more middle class, people who are working in the local offices and the warehouses, clerks, and similar. Some of these are enough that they've got their own little parcel of land at the back. Yeah, quite like that. Let's get our road layer and fill that section in there. Fill this section in here, since that's where all of our wood's going to be stored. We've got ourselves some loose land at the back there as well. That's enough for me to fill out this area. Now I've filled out this little quadrant. I'm going to go check the comments one more time. And depending on what we have there, I'll then go straight on to this section here, which as it currently stands, isn't set up to have any special location, but that may change once we've all had a wee chat, assuming there's anything else in the chat. Okay, I'm pretty cool with that. We definitely have something that works there. If I put a couple of trees and similar there, that'll look pretty good. I'm going to take off that line so I'm not constrained by it when we get to the next section. I'm also going to thin off this line here because it's far too thick. Let me just thin that off a little. There we go. And we got our bridge of some sort over here too. Okay, cool. Anything else in the comments? We have ourselves 3 more comments. Let's have a quick check. Martin says, it's close to the ore store. It is. Maybe some salts are leaching into the local water table. That would certainly make for an interesting drink. Alan has dropped by. Hey, Alan, great to see you here. Good evening, mappers, and good evening to you, Alan. We are currently working on, just to quickly reiterate so you know where we are, if I pull out, we've just done our barge building section, and we're moving on to a slightly more tighter, almost island section with a variety of small local industry, shops, offices, housing, and general living space. If you've got any ideas for anything to go in there, now's the time to drop them. Then we already have 2, maybe 3 locations. We're still determining whether we want to have some sort of local brewer that was suggested by Kieran earlier. I think it was Kieran. No, that was Executor, wasn't it? And possibly run by a local noble attempting to forward a temperance movement, probably aligned to Sigma. So Richard then adds, over there. Richard then says, how about a showroom for the bigger carving projects that may not have been picked up by stingy, broke, deceased clients? You know what? I really like that idea because it's always good to give you an ongoing set of issues rather than everything's perfect, everything's working well. He's probably got a variety of figureheads that have just not sold, or she has a variety of figureheads that have just not sold or have been abandoned or have otherwise not been picked up. So having them possibly even overlooking the water could be quite nice. That could be quite nice, actually. Perhaps his building has got a second floor, and that second floor is almost an outside display where he has hitched up a host of the old figureheads. So he's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like maybe 8 or 9 figureheads on the outside of the building itself on its second floor, and a bunch of smaller things near the bottom. That'll give his building a very clear character that's quite different to everything else, sort of sitting off this area here, overlooking the water here. I think that makes for quite an interesting location. Really quite like that. Do we have a milliner yet? I don't think we do have a milliner yet. Although if we were doing a milliner, I think I'd rather move it away from the docks and put that deep into the middle class section. So I think the milliner is somewhere that we move on to. Here then adds ties to the Rag and Bone Men, perhaps. Yes, we have ourselves our Rag and Bone Men. For those of you who didn't watch last week's stream, they are working from this area here. Our bone pickers have actually got somewhat of a centralized industry working from down there. So they're definitely in the area. The woodcarver recycles cheap wood pulled from the trash heaps and pretties it up for noble clients as they don't know any better. I think that that's something that we could definitely add to his character. Perhaps he's got a good relationship with our bone pickers down here. Nobles are renowned for not actually having a clue about the worth of what they hold. And certain types of wood have got qualities that make them very good for certain types of work. But to a noble, one type of wood looks much the same as the next type. All they're really concerned about is, does it look pretty, and how much did I pay for it, and was it more than my mate? I better have been, because I obviously am richer than them. I'll give an example of that. I may have mentioned this example in a previous stream, actually. A long time ago, I lived at the very north of Scotland. There's an island up there called Stroma. If you want to go and have a look at the north of Scotland maps, you'll be able to find Stroma. My dad worked in the lighthouse at the very north of that island. Now, this island, at least at the time, I don't know if it's still the case, because I imagine he's dead now, was owned by a chap called Jimmy Simpson. Now, Jimmy Simpson, you could argue, was the noble of the land. He was basically the owner of that entire island. It used to be a relatively well-populated island until the Highland clearances, and after that, it was basically just a bunch of shell bothies. The downside for him was each and every single one of those buildings was charged tax, even though they were just shells. That's by the by. He had a plank of wood. This plank of wood he used as a roll-on and roll-off for his tractor onto his small ferry, his small one tractor carrying boat that he used to get on and off the mainland. And this, it was 2 bits of wood actually. This bit of wood was utterly unremarkable and was special, as it turned out. He had somebody pop over to the island, and he was looking at it, and he was utterly appalled. He looked at the bit of wood, which, as far as Jimmy Simpson was concerned, was a piece of scrap wood. And he said, this wood, even in the condition that it's in, is worth over £12,000. The second piece, it's not in as good nick, so it's worth at least 10,000. I can't remember the type of wood it was, but it's a really good wood, and he wanted to buy it off him to turn into furniture. Even in that particular state that it was in, Jimmy refused it because he was also a rich man. Why did he refuse it? Because they were the perfect lengths for him to roll his tractors on and off, and 12 to 24 grand meant literally nothing to him. I bring that story up because some nobles are largely the same, and on both fronts. One, the money doesn't matter, so as long as it fulfills its function, they don't care. But on the other side, they often have no concept at all of what they have in front of them, and stuff just gets thrown out. And him, as a wood specialist, might be able to pick through those discarded pieces of wood from the noble estates and go, this one here is actually worth a freaking lot, and turn the rag and bone goods, which may be worth a few pennies to a silver shilling here or there, into gold. So yeah, I think that's a really nice potential story that we could drop into that area. And further, you go on to say, all goes well until the wrong piece of furniture gets thrown away and the party is sent to track it down. Adventure Hook agreed completely, and I love it. Martin then adds, the figureheads roped up on a block and tackle hanging from the eaves would appear to be on the gallows. Ha! That's a good piece of character building. Make sure that when you post up that location, that you add that in as a bit of text afterwards so we don't forget it, because that's freaking awesome. I'll also add just a small comment there. If you want to help us actually write up these locations and not just build them slowly through the course of the stream, we're building a writing team to write up every single location in this city. And if you'd like to be a part of that, make sure you ping me on Discord. I dropped comments earlier in the stream for where you can catch us on Discord. It is here. If you want to find the actual comment, go flying up and go check in the previous comments. You'll find the actual link up there. We're going to be building it. Lots of fun. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thanks. Mark Armstrong. Hey, Mark. Great to see you here. Quick hello. Hello in return. Can't stay and watch this evening. Boo. We'll catch up while mini painting this weekend. Good luck with that. Looking good. Yeah, I think it's really beginning to come together in a rather nice fashion. I have, however, noticed that the building at the top there doesn't have its highlights on. So just quickly drop a couple of those in place while I'm going by. Good luck with the miniature painting. And if you're watching this later while you're miniature painting, I hope it's going really well. Drop some of your miniatures up in the Discord channel so we can see how they are, assuming that you're the sort that likes to share images of that ilk. If you're a slapdash army painter, as well I am somewhat want to be, then you might not want to share them. It depends entirely on your own preferences, but if you do want to share, that'd be awesome. And finally, add-on ads. And the island has a lot of small shops, inns, merchants, and what have you, with narrow passageways going through the buildings. It could be called the Warrens by the locals. Yeah, absolutely could. Particularly if we make it a bit more Warren-like as we do the next couple of sections. Okay, so we've done enough here. to get an idea. And indeed, Martin, if you're still there, let's remind ourselves of the name. I'm going to drop it here because I quite like it, not necessarily the Warrens per se. I'm on the highlights layer. It may be preferable to call it something else. We'll just pop that there so that we don't forget it. Right, let's build the sections. Right? I'm going to quickly, so I don't forget it, color in the bit that we've already done, because we've got ourselves a clear feature location here already for our carver. He's got an awful lot of character. I keep on saying he, but I've got a feeling it's actually a she. The more I've discussed the location, the more I'm getting a feel for it. And I think it's someone who probably has a very dry wit, hence the hangings, which she will refer to as a certain gallows humor that she has. I quite like that too. I see her as quite strong, a burly individual who is somewhat no nonsense, makes friends slowly, but once they're made, fast friendships are formed. And a quick way to get on our bad side is to commission something and not see that commission through. Perhaps she's got a vindictive streak. Definitely worth potentially plumbing that character out. Okay, that's this section done. I'm just going to leave it without its highlights and shades for the moment so we can go into our next section, where we're going to have our animal trainer. Or will I do this section first? I'd quite like to get our animal trainer just so I get an idea. I'm going to make it a bigger location than I originally intended when I was first imagining it. I'm going to go for a relatively small building that the animal trainer lives in. Let's have it curved around the corner slightly, like so. But with a host of cages and similar inside buildings. This is probably quite a noisy area. Animals whooping and calling. Let's make this a bit tighter to reinforce the idea that we've got different ways through these. Lock off that section there. Okay. Again, there's lots of ways you can do roofs, but most of the ones I've been doing for this map have been relatively simple. The goal being to try and ensure that everything that we're doing for this map is easily duplicatable by anybody else out there. So if you're watching this going, I think I could do that, the plan for this is that you actually do go and do it. This stream started off with me giving a demonstration for how you could use one of the tutorials that we made for the rookery and how that could be used in practice on your own maps at home. Okay, so that's that area done. We've got our location in. I'm just going to very quickly color that in. Oh, wrong color. Color in the purple location so that it's done. Before I go on to the next section, I will check the comments. So if you've got anything you want me to check, make sure you pop it in now and I will get it up on screen. I'll do that once I've finished off quickly doing the coloring for this section and then popping in the roads that sit in at the back. Yeah, that's a tight little place. Building at the back. And we want to promote the Warren feel. We'll have to make sure the next location is pretty Warren-like. I will build a couple of twisty roads through that one before we start mapping that one out to make sure that we don't forget the twisty, turny nature that we want to try and drop into that area. Okay, that's that. Let's pop the road on. So this bit you can move through, and that bit, like so. And that's an open area at the front, and the animals do things like it. Okay, cool. Let's go check if there's any other comments. Martin says, we still need to nail down district names. We do. I completely agree. Many of the ones I've used in location thumbnails are placeholders. Absolutely. I think possibly, because I'm intending on starting off the write-ups. I'm building all the templates for our write-ups, as we loosely discussed over in Discord, through the course of this week, because I'd like that to be started up before we start doing the main enemy within streams. We've already set a date unofficially behind the scenes. No, it's completely officially. We know when we're starting. We just haven't announced it yet. We haven't announced it just in case a technological disaster happens in the other room. But we will give you a 20-day warning before we go completely live, which really is not that far away, he said, half panicking. So I want to get all of the write-ups for those started so that the templates are in place for NPCs and locations. So when I do all the write-ups for everything that's popped up in the stream, some of which are going to have to be brief by nature because I'm going to be doing it myself. But when I do those, I've already got a template to follow. So I'd like to be doing that this week. And when we're doing that, we're as well to start nailing down district names and getting them all into place because we really want to. Richard then adds, to elaborate on the comment by Martin Rook, maybe a character sees one of the Gallo-esque figureheads and has a vision of some sort. Dooming or plot hook, or maybe both, Richard. I do like a good dooming. Alan then drops in and says, technological disasters are like 1 in a million, which means that they happen 9 times out of 10. Yeah, you're totally right. You're talking to somebody who, I remember about 20 years ago, I had a discussion with another artist who said that their hard drive had broken down and they'd taken their hard drive into a hard drive shop, and the guy who was responsible for trying to extract the information from the hard drive so that he wouldn't lose all of his past work, said, I can't. The way that the hard drive is broken, I'd literally have to open it up and go through it bit by bit, which I can't do here because I don't have a dust-free environment, which means you've got to send it off for all the money, and even then they can't guarantee they'll be able to get the information out. Your hard drive's actually died, and this never happens. I mean, I've never seen it ever happen before. We've had quite a lot of discussions behind the scenes here as to what's actually happened, and this hard drive is as dead as a dodo. It's completely screwed. And I was like, well, that sucks for you. And he was like, yeah, you know, it's a 1 in a million thing. Apparently it never happens. It's now happened to me 3 times. 1 in a million, my arse. So when it comes to tech, I automatically assume it's all going to go wrong pretty much every single time. Right. So we've had no further comments regarding anything to put into this location other than that twisty-turny nature of what we're doing here. So I'm going to just continue on with that location, adding some twisty-turny bits. So let me just quickly do so. I'm going to do that with a mixture of quickly placed roads so that we've got that idea that our folks can get into this area and get potentially lost. And then I'm just going to fill this up, and we're going to assume that this, particularly this part, is just almost slum-like in the way it's all piled on top of each other. Closer to a rookery, perhaps, than almost any other part that we've built so far. A lot of our slums that we've had so far have just been repurposed tenements or buildings that have moved in another way. We can have this be the first one that's actually beginning to pile. Imagine a 40K hive city, but in incredibly small form. And we can have this be this layered set of buildings. Now, again, I'm going to be making sure that the roads can be clearly seen as you work your way through this area. In truth, the buildings probably lean against each other. There's buildings stacked on top. There's probably no daylight if you're going through these roads. But we can't show that in the map, because if we do, it just looks like one giant building. And it's not very useful for both the GM to understand ways for the players to move through there if they don't want to just make it up with the theater of the mind on the day. And it's equally not so useful for the players who look at it and go, this just looks like one giant building. What the hell is this place? Where if you've got twisty-turny, tiny roads through it, they immediately recognize it for what it is. The map is a representation of reality. It most certainly is not reality. Much like rules for your role-playing games, we're not going pure simulationist here, because you're always going to fail if you try. And in the same way, our maps are never going to be purely simulationist, because you're never going to actually succeed, no matter how well you try. Martin adds a quick comment regarding tech, going, ha, I live under that tech dread cloud too. Yeah, me too. I'm of an age where technology was constantly unreliable, so thus I assume it's always going to be unreliable. And that's it's an actual, oops, I've changed brush by mistake there. It's an actual thing on things like TikTok, for example. On TikTok, there's a entire set of folks who refer to the millennial pause. And the millennial pause is people who start their TikToks or start their videos by pressing the button, stopping to make sure that it's working, and then going. So all of their videos start like this. Hi! And it's just that half second to second pause before they go. Unlike most people who have been brought up on far more recent and much more reliable technology, where they press the button and just go, hi, I'm going. There is no pause. And if you go watch TikToks, you can actually see that in action because it's a very real thing. You tend to find that once people pass a certain age, their TikToks often start with a bit of a, is this working? Yep, let's go. So yeah, I am that generation. I try not to be, but I can't escape my experiences. And my experiences are that tech sucks and constantly breaks on me. I'm quite used to that. It's the way I am. I'm not going to change just because tech apparently has become more reliable, because it hasn't. Out of the cameras that we've bought for our streaming so far, four of them, not just one or two, but four of them have proven unacceptable for one reason or another, all of which were fine according to other streamers. One of the cameras that we've eventually gone for, and I'm using two of them for our cameras for the two sides of the table, so one bank of 3 players and the other bank of 3 players. Both of those are actually 10-year-old cameras in the end, the ones we went for, because they were just much more reliable for streaming with. The camera that's on to me, which I was roundly recommended by many, is absolutely astonishingly good. But oh my God, is it a faff to set up? It's just hard. Every single time we stream, we've got to reset up that camera. And it's the most expensive and most faffy of them all. So yeah, tech and me, they don't necessarily go hand in hand. On that, hopefully by next week, we'll have ourselves a little intro video of some sort before we go live with the Kalegan streams. So if any of you happen to be there at the beginning, I will hopefully have a nice setup startery video that you'll be able to watch and go, yep, there's a countdown on that. It's counting down. Things must be happening over at Lawhammer. I'm busy doing that over on an editor just now, and I'm doing it very simply, but I'm using it as practice for maybe building something similar for the Rookery, because we don't really have one over there for that either. And it's about time that we probably did. Okay, so I'm keeping most of these buildings pretty small. I'm keeping it tight. I'll leave a couple of areas a bit dirty in the middle. I'm following the loose roads that I started at the beginning. I'm not going to look at the comments until I've quickly filled in this section. We're probably not looking at many stories here, anything from 4 to 5, something like that at most. Buildings layered upon buildings, layered upon buildings. Solid foundations in this part of the town, though. So we're not looking at the same sort of situation that we have down in the south of the city, where it's all begun to collapse into subsidence. The lower sections, as in the ground floor, have probably turned to shops and retail and similar outlets, cottage industries. The Empire is a really bizarre mixture of anachronisms and historical stuff, all welded together in a variety of weird ways, meaning that we have ourselves quite a capitalist society that has been built up, because most of the people that created it were themselves capitalists and actually couldn't think of any other way of how the system may have worked back then. So we've got ourselves probably quite a lot of shops and industries and similar stuff here. I think we're definitely getting a sensation of a crowded area, though. Possibly get some sort of towery thing sitting there, maybe a dome, just to make Yalib happy should he be out there when he eventually reaches this stream. Okay, that's a relatively tight area. We have no special locations to mark into this as it currently stands. So I'm probably just going to color this entire area in brown. I don't want to put our potential other location that we're going to use, which would be our temperance brewers who are making apple juices and various other fruit style juices, which also happen to be the very best mixers you could possibly imagine. So their business, which was started on temperance, is now entirely based on and is continued by intemperance up in the noble courts, where they're using all of the tasty stuff that is created in their various alcoholic offerings at their parties and their salons. Okay, yeah, I quite like this area. That looks relatively tight, but it's got enough character for us to get an idea of how it works. I'm going to add a little bit of just black spotting across this to give the idea that some of the roofs are beginning to collapse. Again, I don't want to spend too much time. This part of the map is going to be tiny come the finished version. I'm also going to get rid of my extras, which I could have just done by doing Control H, and I really should have, but I didn't. There we go. Recommend if you do use Photoshop a lot, which I'm using, get to learn all the quick key commands, because going Control H is much faster way of bringing up my grid than constantly going in. I constantly forget that one. Okay, I'm happy with that area. So I'm going to quickly run through the comments. So there's nothing there. I'm going to go running right back into the next section 2. Here in ads, I always think of the Kowloon Wall City when trying to imagine a district in a Sive city, and a good idea. That infographic, which was created, I don't know how long now, it must have been ages, at least 10 years old now, where they showed what it was like in Kowloon City, to this day still makes me smile, because it's such a good way of accessing what that location could be like. Just love it. That mixture of really nice places and horrible places sitting side by side and layered high. Just brilliant. Richard then adds, also guilty of thinking Temple Break will be unreliable. Yeah, I know. It's part of our age, I suppose. We need another boat on a house to keep Yalev truly happy. Maybe we should make one of the houses over here a repurposed barge that's been turned upside down and used as the roofing, just to really upset Yalev when he gets there. Maybe just a house with a crow's nest. You can't go wrong with a house with a crow's nest. It's much like I have throughout the entirety of my life wanted to have a house with a balcony. Don't ask me why. I just want a house with a balcony. Have I had one yet? No. Have I lived in houses with one, as in being in a house that we could walk out the balcony in? Yes. Did I like it? Yes. Do I have a balcony? No. When we were doing the refitting of this house and doing the plans, did I get them to do plans to do a balcony on our house? Yes, I blinking did. Did we build it? Sadly, no. Right, we've got 2 sections left to do. Before I do that, I'll have a quick check at what Kieran's got added. Could the slum have a radical printing press running in it somewhere? Safest place from the guards as they leave the area well alone. Right, so there's a small mention here about our guards. Our guards in this city do not guard. I know that might sound a bit weird, but I shall very briefly explain it. It's been covered in our previous streams to some extent, in fact, to some length, so I won't go into it in great detail. But loosely, this is a city that has no city guard. And by that, I mean there's no watch guard. There is no watch. It's much like most medieval cities in that regard. They had no town watch. What they had was people that were under the control of the local lord, or in our case, because it's Warhammer, it's the state armies, and they have a state army. They don't have an investigative police. They just have somebody who is responsible for the Pax Imperialis, the peace of the empire. And they are not responsible for checking down crime. Trying crime is the responsibility of the law, and getting people to there is responsibility of just the normal people. That's how law used to be handled back in the day, before we got ourselves a big police force with the coppers of London, with good old Bobby Peel's folk, the Bobbies, Robert Peel's lot. They were the first real big police policing system in England, for example. And they were the first ones to be just normal citizens who were full-time employed to do what they were already doing, which was basically dragging people up to magistrates and saying, this person's guilty, and here's all my pals who confirm it. Well, that person goes, yeah, no, I'm completely innocent, and my pals say I'm innocent, and then the judge goes, well, I'll have to make a judgment, because that's the judge's job. There'll be local constables of the law who are responsible for taking in these cases and taking them over. But we're not going to have ourselves a proper watch system like, say, for example, Altdorf, which does have one. Middenheim, which does have a police force.
the Watchman force. So we don't need to worry too much about Watchmen wandering around doing this stuff, but we do need to worry about local lords getting upset about what pamphleteers might be saying and sending their private troops down or state armies down to get them the hell out of there. So loosely, there's a lot more to it. There's bits about investigators and thief takers and all other stuff, but go check our previous threads if you want to have more of a chat on that one. Here in the NADs, I was thinking more along the lines of cracking down on behalf of local nobility. Indeed, yeah, that. Don't want the pros getting ideas after all. Yes, you absolutely don't, stinking pros. Hearing that idea of a printing press makes me think of a good way to get in the old 2nd edition career of pamphleteer. Has pamphleteer not been out? Pamphleteer's in 4th edition. Pretty sure, because I'm pretty sure I added it. Pamphleteer is in the 1st tier of agitator, as I recall. And if it's not, I'm going to be very embarrassed. I'm pretty sure it is, but pamphleteer is in there. The entire construction of the 4th edition careers was to do what had happened in 1st edition and 2nd edition, but no one had realized, and to just consolidate it. And that's that in 1st and 2nd, it's most cleanly seen with the wizards. So I'll use them as the example. In 1st edition, the wizards were just 4 careers put together as one career. So you had wizard level 1, wizard level 2, wizard level 3, wizard level 4. In 2nd edition, they split that up and they made it 4 careers. But those 4 careers were wizard level 1, wizard level 2, wizard level 3, wizard level 4. There was no difference. Plus, they shared lots of skills. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 came along and combined the careers back into wizard level 1, wizard level 2, wizard level 3, and wizard level 4, but for every career. The reason being was that no matter what job you took, there was always going to be a level 4 option. Because if, for example, you played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3, you'll have noted that there was loads of level 1 careers, a few level 2, a much smaller number of level 3, and an absolutely tiny level of number of epic careers. Meaning that if you played a long-term career, everybody ended up with the same very small number of options. Where Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4, with its core setup, was designed around the idea of no matter where you start, there is a natural place for you to go to if you wish. But because of the career system, you can go in any direction. And each one of the 4 tiers is its own discrete, unique career. And that's how they should be imagined and viewed. Even though they share certain skills, that's no more than the case, the case in, for example, 1st edition or 2nd edition, and also 3rd too. Just because they share skills doesn't mean that they should always be separated. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. Moving down, Martin then says, there's a printing press linked to agitators up in the Sawmill area. I think it's called the Piketail Tenement. Did you name that yourself by any chance? But yes, we do have one printing press up there already. But that doesn't mean that we can't have another one. This is a highly political center. So having ourselves an underground one, particularly in the Warrens, I think makes sense. I'm not against the idea. Although maybe the agitators up there spread rumors of another location, rival press. Yeah, totally. Plus, I quite like the idea of having more than one of them, and making a key location down here does make sense. Richard Alnez, very well could be. I'm new to 4th, so haven't triple read every career yet. Don't worry about it. We're all new to 4th in our own way because it's got changed over the course of time as different books have come out. The original game that I designed is quite different to the game that's now been out. Plus, the game that we're going to be playing in our streams when we do the Enemy Within, and we're going to be streaming out weekly from here, the game that we're going to be doing is, again, going to be completely different because we're going to... I've rewritten every career. That's it. For our game, I wanted a far faster, snappier version of the rules so that we weren't slowed down when we were playing, because you don't want to, if you're watching the game, watch us doing this. Plus 20, that means we've got, oh, wait a minute, no, I'm at long range, that's another, I get, no, that's plus 60, oh, fuck, what's my modifier, what the fuck? We don't want that. We don't want mass at the table. We want it all to be super fast. And because it's my own game, and I'm not burdened by the legacy of having to create whatever is required to be the next version of Warhammer, it's just what's going to be at our table. We can streamline it without any problems in the slightest about worrying what other people think. Anyway, getting past that. Pamphleteer is indeed 1st tier of agitator. Good to know. It's also, I think, 1st tier of agitator that I did over on my updated the career, because I updated the career, as I recall, over on Lawhammer. Why don't I just quickly check that to see if I'll quickly check it by spelling agitator correctly. Agitator. It's got a second T under. And is it there?
There's Agitator. Let me just give you a link for those of you who want to see the update that I did for the career. And the first level of it is also Pamphleteer. So that's the version of the career that we'll be using in our game. Here in ads, can confirm Pamphleteer's in there in tier 1. You even get your own pile of leaflets. Super important. In my version over there, you get hammer and nails for bashing those pamphlets up in place, and 2d10 pamphlets. Probably the same as what was written into the core. Richard says, thanks, Andy Martin, for the info on the Pamphleteer. Not a problem. And here, not a problem. No worries, says here. I've always quite fancied playing a propagandist in, interesting, Fantasy Flight, Star Wars. Alas, always the GM, never the player. Alas. No, Piketail isn't one of mine. I can hardly believe it. And that's the link for the Agitator for anyone who wants to go have a look at it. Anyway, I think we've got a strong idea here. I am going to drop a purple location down in here. Where have I put my pen? Oh, it's fallen on the floor. Pardon me. Will I slide down and pick it up off the floor? Right. So let's pop in one purple location in here so that we can have ourselves some sort of popular people's front of printers. We can figure out exactly what that is over in Discord and detail out who it is that's working from there. We want someone that's relatively deep and tight on the inside. So we could go for right in the middle, which is safe. But I think this one here looks like it's a bit tighter. And it's also accessible from two sides, which means if they're raided from one side, they can get out the other. Love it. Okay, that makes for a perfect location. Now that I've done that, I'm going to quickly brown in all the other buildings. And then once that's done, I'm going to get a different brush because that brush is, in fact, far too slow for what I want to do. Much better. Okay, once I've done that, we'll draw in the last ones. In terms of comments, we have ourselves our Temperance Movement brewer. Anyone any ideas for how that should look or any details that would make that place more interesting? It's funded by a Sigmarite leaning noble family and has unfortunately been entirely co-opted, although possibly not knowingly, by a host of noble houses who are purchasing the marvelous beverage, which has become inexplicably popular as a mixer for the various spirits that they're serving at the parties in town. The adventure hooks for this, I think, to a degree, almost write themselves. So quite looking forward to that. But if you've got any idea for how big you think this building should be, what you think would make it characterful and interesting, do drop that in as a comment. And I'll draw that in. I quite like this area. I think it's got enough character to really stand on its own 2 feet almost in this entire section without all the rest of it. I think it's pretty much just a rookery in and of itself. Sort of place that if I was writing this as an actual book and I was intending on publishing it, it's the sort of place that you'd want to have a really strong illustration for, so that you could get an idea of just how tight the buildings are, what they look like from the outside, because a map like this just does not do this sort of location justice sometimes, because it looks like it's relatively open, relatively easy to get into. But you want to get that idea that the whole thing's this towering amalgamation of buildings. All right, let's get back to my core brush that I'm always using and organize our last two sections here. Martin has added random townsperson. I hear those alligators are handing out pamphlets again. Yeah, indeed, those stinking random townsperson. I think the brewer would have large copper tanks. Can't go wrong with a good copper tank. And given that we've already got someone else using copper locally, that works quite well. Thanks, Executor. Martin then adds, are the printing presses up to movable type or do they need full page carvings? Well, in the Empire, it's up to movable type easily. So yeah, I see no reason that they wouldn't have that. But equally, I see no reason that they might not be a bit backward. We can decide that when it's written. The Sigmarite noble patron of the soft drinkery might not be liked and may, as the potential victim at the party I mentioned earlier with the monkey trainer, is the main suspect. Now we're wrapping them together. And this is loosely what I was discussing about trying to make sure your hooks link. But if you're doing that in terms of building your hooks, you've got to make sure that one hook takes you away from this location, for example, up to the noble parties, and the hook there then takes you right back down to where the assassin is. So that means that when we're writing the hooks, one section, which could be, for example, this here, here's a brewer. Oh, their drinks have been used for the wrong reason. Go investigate, will you? Ha, ha, ha. They go up there and, oh my goodness, the person who's behind the drinks has been assassinated. Who did that? Then you're right back down to the animal trainer again, possibly with another link in between. The job when you're building these things is to try and take people on a tour through the city with your adventure hooks. It means that as a GM, if you come in later and you're like, well, what am I going to do with my players this week? They happen to be going to this particular location because that's what the adventure says. You just go to that location. It's got 2 adventure hooks, both of which go to 2 different parts of town. And both of those 2 different parts of town go to other parts of town. And you end up building yourself a campaign without actually having to do any work. Job done. Here in the Naz, location could be a proper brewery that has been reclaimed by Temperance Movement. I like that. That's got flavor. Perhaps a beloved local brew. The old owners could be pretty peeved about it. I like that. Anything that builds conflict always gets my vote. I like that a lot. Richard then adds, maybe the party was to roll out, debut a new soft drink flavor. And it proper, yes, I gathered what you were saying there, Kieran. On the to-do list are district write-ups when boundaries and names are nailed down. Yes, absolutely, thanks. And then Alan adds, brewery or distillery, and in the latter, how explosive should it be? We have options. In terms of depicting it, I don't need to worry about the options too much. I'm going to pretty much make it half of this area. And I'm going to build something that could be any of the above. Something that goes right down onto the water. Because they're going to be using barges to pick up their goods. And also stuff is going to be coming in by barge. It's going to get offloaded to them. So it's going to have an open area at the front. It's going to have a main factory, main office off to the side. A watch house responsible for keeping things in order that oversees one of the gatehouses there. So a gatehouse to the south doing largely the same job. That's not the south, but for reasons in my head, apparently it turned into the south. Let's mark that in as well. Okay, I'm getting a pretty good idea what this place could feel like as we're just filling it in slowly. Let's pop that up like so. Yeah, quite liking this location already. It's going to be the entirety of this section of the town. A couple of old yeah, okay. Now I've got that in place. I'm going to take my road layer and just mark out all the areas that are open for holding stock, barrels, all the rest of it. That brush is absolutely tiny. Let's get a bigger one. Oops. It's a bit better. Okay, that's not bad. I'll quickly check the comments before I color this place in, but I've already got a pretty strong idea of what this place is like. I'm liking how it looks. It's got character. It's telling a story about the location, about this entire city, actually. There's a lot going for this one. I imagine these are probably big copper, like stills or some equivalent there, like that. Let's make sure we've got extra chimneys at the back to support that. Yeah, love it. Right, let's quickly run through here. Now I have a memory of the lemonade man that would deliver bottle, the lemonade man who bottles of fizz and collect, was it lemonade up your way? And collect empties. Yeah, where I came from in the north of Scotland, there was always a big lorry And this was both the case when I lived in Gospey and then when I moved up to Thurso, and that we used to go around all the various houses and sell crates of lemonade by the bottle. And then we'd come back next week, pick up the old bottles with all the reusable glass bottles in them, and then bring in a new bottle of a new set of bottles. There might be a reason that I'm diabetic these days, because I drank a lot of freaking lemonade of various flavors. Yeah, so I also have that memory. Richard Allen then adds, side question before I have to go and run errands. Have you made any starting provincial modifiers for new characters in the Meoyer? I'm not quite sure what you're saying with that word. In that, have you made any starting modifiers in the different provinces that those people have to put out? Yes, I have. If so, are they in Discord and Lawhammer site? I think I may have already put them up on the site. I've for my game, I've basically written myself my own core rulebook, which takes the original core rulebook and everything that I've changed, I just change it and then just pop that up as a folder for my players. And that includes a complete rewrite of the entirety of the character generation section. And in that, there is a set of rules for every single grand province in the Empire. There's a set of rules for different gnomish boroughs. There's a set of rules for different types of ogres, a set of rules for different types of elf, and also dwarf. It's focused on the Empire, though. Let me just double check if I've got species, step 1 species. I may have it up online. Let's find out. I'm just checking for you right now. And I don't have the actual full stats online. I'll see about popping that up very soon. Go check the Lawhammer blog. That's over on Patreon. The first step of it's already up there, though. I'll see about the rest of them and see how far I've gone. I can't recall exactly how much I've done because I haven't done that part for a wee while, but I do have it all written, so it's all good to go. So the answer to that is yes, I have done more. Herein also adds Corn Brewery engaged in the deepest and darkest of rituals intent on summoning the greater demon known only as the Kool-Aid Man. Uh-oh, not the Kool-Aid Man. He cares not from where the juice flows. Martin adds, I don't know if it's just that guy, but he would stand in the street and shout ominade. Interesting. No, I didn't get that. R1 had established clients and he literally went from door to door to door with everyone that he worked with. And he had just posters posted up in town. Thanks. Sorry for the typo. That's supposed to say Empire. Yes, I have all of the Empire covered and we will have more. And you also have thank you. Yeah, not a problem. And thanks so much for joining the stream if you are popping off. It was an absolute delight having your extra ideas. Nothing new has come from this section, so I'm going to immediately color it in with my location color. And given the time, we're coming up to 9 o'clock now. I probably, oh, that's a messy brush. Let me just change that. I'll probably stop this stream. Wow, that's also a messy brush. Let me just fix that too. I'll probably stop this stream when I finish this section. So that's filling out the remainder of the triangle, as it was called at the beginning of the stream. Doing the highlights and the shades for all of the buildings in it. And then we can probably call it a day for today. And we'll put up an event for next week where we'll be on to part 15, which to me seems crazy. Okay, yeah, that works. Let's zoom out on that one. Love it. I'm now just going to quickly do these last two sections, which are just going to be buildings. These are going to be brown buildings, no special features, no special locations. We've got more than enough in this area already. We don't need to have more. And if we did have more, they'd be buttoned right up against those stevedores. So we don't need that either. So we're going to have probably a row of townhousey type shops there. In fact, why not just make this a townhouse block? Classic piece of Empire building with a space in the middle. Washing can hang out over that. Kids can play down at the bottom. You get buildings like this across Europe, in the UK, higher tenements that are often 2 to 3 stories, sometimes even 4 stories high. These are relatively new builds. So this one here is probably looking at around about 40 years old, so old enough that the stone has begun to wear, that the roof has begun to collapse in places and sag, because we are, after all, playing Warhammer, so you tend to find that decay is around every corner. things are beginning to collapse everywhere. So we have ourselves a nice big area, and then we're going down into the front here. So I'm going to turn this into mostly warehouses, cordoned off yard there onto that warehouse. Probably some sort of office or building working in there, going into some smaller warehouses onto the water, and one building at the back. Yeah, this is very small in terms of the final image, so details on this are not frightfully important. Let me get my road here and just fill in the areas in between, because this is not like so. And then let's just color that in. We're making pretty good progress today, I think. As I mentioned before, all of the tools that I use to create this map are covered in the Rookery tutorial. I should really get a link for that. For next time, I'm just going to have a link floating for it. So whenever I bring it up, I can say, go check the tutorial here if you want a map like this. Because that's much easier to do than constantly referring to it and then say, go do a web search and find it for yourself. Oops, it's not special location, wrong one. There we go. So once I've done this, the next job will be doing my highlights and my shades, taking a look at it all, perhaps adding a little bit of vegetation here or there, using our vegetation trees layer, and then probably calling it a day when we zoom out and look at everything that we've done with a smug sense of satisfaction upon our faces. Right. That'll do. Let's zoom out a little bit while I sort out these shades. All right, so this is a taller tenement style building. So we want the shadow to go down quite far over that building, covering it entirely. Relatively long tower. Excellent. Let's do these parts. All right, so we're largely done in terms of content being put onto the map. But if through the course of this, you're just looking at it as I'm drawing and you're like, wait a minute, we could use that bit to do that. Or have you thought of this for this area? What do you think of this? Do drop it in as the comments. Equally, if you've got a really cool idea, you're coming to this stream later, please do drop by our Discord. I dropped the comment earlier in the stream as to exactly where that is. Do drop by, tell us your ideas there. Also, the old appeal for likes and shares and all that gubbins. If you've enjoyed the video, and let's be honest, even if you haven't enjoyed the video, please do click like. That would be amazing. That old thumbs up marker under YouTube. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. We're going to have a wealth of various mapping and Warhammer content coming on here over the course of the next so many months. It's not just going to be Kalegan. If certain people have their way, I might end up mapping outdoor for all I know in a very interesting way. I'm not sure I want to do that, though, because the map will be freaking enormous, and I'm not sure my computer will cope with it. So I might need a new computer before I even consider doing that. But it's definitely a possibility. I'm going to sink all of this down into darkness to suggest the heights that we're dealing with here. There we go. Shades aplenty. Yeah. So the old like, share, ring that bell, all those things that people say on YouTube. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Love you forever. And that kind of stuff. Right, okay. I think we've done the core of our highlight, our shades, pardon me. Oh, no, I haven't. Well, I've got a whole chunk here that I haven't done. What am I talking about? Let's pretend that I didn't say that and just carry on shading. almost there. So when I finish all the shades, I'll check the comments again. See if there's anything. Oh, there's loads I missed there. Wow. Almost done the shades, my bum. Almost done the shades if I don't want to do all the shades, perhaps. So I'm going to check the comments one more time after I've done the shades, and then I'll dive in and do the highlights right after that. Are we done yet? Oh, are we there yet? Oh no, we've still got parts to do on our big, huge brewery stroke temperance movement area. Okay, that's better. That's done. That's done. And a little bit down there, a little bit down there, a little bit on that. That'll do. Yeah, that'll do. Right, let's go check our comments. Thank you, Richard. We already covered that one. Unless it's lemonade, but ominous lemonade. Richard Allen then adds, we'll definitely be back for another show. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Richard. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really enjoy these streams. These are my stress relief. I work pretty gosh darn it hard through the course of the week. And this is my switch my brain off for a few hours in the evening that I really do enjoy. And it's made all the more enjoyable because people like yourself come in and you just throw ideas at the screen. And some of them stick, some of them don't, but some of them are just beautiful. And they just make doing this so much more fun. So thanks very much for coming by. I'm delighted that you say you'll come back again. Martin then adds, we used to have Hall's bottling plant down in the local town, almost like a dairy with milk floats, except fizzy drinks and crisps. Yeah, totally. And I think it was that loop of business that used to come up by our way. Martin then adds, don't forget the blooming figurehead on the vegetation layer. Yeah, good point. We need to get that down at the bottom, although it's going to be super tiny, so I'm not sure you're actually going to see it very well. But yeah, good point. Always enjoy the videos. Thanks for saying so, Alan. I can't express how much that means. It's just really nice that you come in and you say nice things. When you're sitting at home, doing your own thing, getting lost in yet another proofread of a product that you've been proofreading for what feels like 10 years. It's just really nice to be able to kick back and just create some stuff and have people go, this is great. Here, Naya Nad, +1 for Altdorf. Yeah, you wouldn't be the only one asking for that one. I'll stick it to my outdoor source book. Yeah, I still haven't read the outdoor source book because I kind of find it hard to bring myself to do so because I had done so much work on it. I don't know how many of you go to the Rat Catchers Guild, but I'd even reached out in the Rat Catchers Guild to try and get everybody to crowdsource every single source from Altdorf into a big Google sheet. And we'd done about a third of that. We'd gone through a ton of Black Library novels, a ton of comics. And Andy and I, that's Andy Leask, one of the writers that I worked with, close pal, also going to be in our streams for when we do The Enemy Within. We had built the entirety of the Altdorf book. The whole thing was done. Andy had written about a third of what he wanted it to be. It was all looking like it was done. And then things happened and I resigned. He resigned. All of us stopped working it and all that material just went away. It just kind of died. And it sucked. Then obviously a new book came out and it didn't have any of our material in it because they didn't have it. So I find it a hard book to look at. But I'm going to have to at some point because I'm going to want to incorporate, if I build my own Altdorf map, all the cool extras that they've added in. I'm also going to have to look at all the stuff that I had before and go, well, how on earth do I make that fit into the Altdorf that they've now described? Because the Altdorf they've described doesn't include all these things that are in all the various Black Library books that we've had sourced and crowdsourced together. I'm not entirely sure how we'll do this. But if I do that, it's going to be a relatively epic task. Yeah. Right, let's get on to the highlights so that we can move towards finishing off for the day. So highlights are just the white as before. Not too much, just enough to give the impression of the areas that are lifted up and above the others. Some of these buildings are pretty large, so they cast shadows right over everything. Like, as we have noted in our previous streams, all of the light on our maps comes from the top left of the map, which makes absolutely zero sense at all if you actually consider where the sunlight would be coming from. But let's not dwell on that. The reason that we do it this way has nothing to do with making something that is geologically, I mean, is it geologically, astronomically, whatever. That's absolutely correct. It's all about what looks good. And we as Westerners tend to look from the top down towards the bottom right. Top left down to bottom right. And thus having the light coming from top down to bottom right naturally makes a certain head sense to us. So you tend to find that most maps, when they're doing lighting and shading, tend to do this. It makes no sense. Literally none. I've done it on more maps than I care to mention. And I've done it now for multiple editions of Warhammer. I've done it for, well, just tons of maps that I've created over the years. And yeah, it is what it is. I'm fully aware that I'm doing something that makes not a great deal of sense, but I nevertheless still do it. Why isn't that highlighting? There it goes. It just, for reasons unknown to man, decided to stop working there. Let me just quickly pick out some of these. I'm not going to do too many of them. I just want enough so that it's caught and you get the idea that light is pricking off various broken slates, old weather vanes, and if it looks anything like what Sam did on the front of the GM screen when we were sorting that picture, we've probably got a wizard standing on top of one of the buildings chanting something stupid. Okay, it looks like we've done most of the highlights there. So let's have a quick zoom out to have a look at what we've got. Okay, we have finished off that entire section. We have done all of the south side of the city. Look at that. We are done. Right, so what I'm going to do next is I'm not just going to go on to the next section of the town. I'm going to put a poll up on Patreon, and it's not going to be a closed poll, so it's not just going to be patrons, it's going to be for everyone. So if you're not one of our patrons, don't worry about it. You can still pop up and hopefully vote, assuming that I don't screw it up. And if I do screw it up, I apologize for saying it'll be an open poll. It won't be. It'll be a closed poll. But I'm going to put a poll up on Patreon for the next area that we're going to map out. I'll pop 3 locations up. For those of you who've watched all the other streams and you already know what the locations are, and you've got a preference for which one that I go to next, do feel free to drop that over on Discord. I'm just zooming out so I can take a look at the whole map and where it's currently sitting. We made some pretty goddamn good progress there. I'm loving it. Yeah, so I'll pop up 3 different locations to be voted on so that we can cover those next week. But beyond that, I would just like to say a super enormous thanks to everyone that contributed this week, whether you could only stay on for 10 minutes or whether you stayed on for the full 2.25 hours. It's been enormously appreciated. As I say, your contributions to building this city are what make it bright and interesting and full of things that I almost certainly would never have considered myself. So thank you all so much for that. Next week, we'll go and do something I think quite different. I'm going to stick inside the city walls, so whatever I put up will be inside the city walls. But beyond that, thanks so much. I'm going to now sit back and go spend the rest of my evening, I don't know, play a computer game or something. I'm currently playing Last Spell, I think it's called, which is a weird mixture of roguelite and strategy. Quite an interesting game, recently popped out. Playing it on PS5, recommend it if you fancy it. But beyond that, I will give a big, huge thanks to everyone one more time and say goodbye. And thanks very much for saying it was a good stream. I will see you all next time, hopefully next Thursday. Sayonara. Bye-bye.